Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started and continue to let some more folks in. But I want to welcome you all. Today, we're going to be learning about how to plant your Arbor Day seedling. And most of this year's seedlings are also really great for birds, bees, and beyond in Atlanta. My name is Elizabeth Beek. I coordinate adult education programs here at Trees Atlanta. And I also want to introduce my colleague. Go ahead, Quinn.
Hi, I'm Quinn Hadley, the Education Registrar here at Trees Atlanta.
Thank you so much, Quinn. Nothing at Trees Atlanta's education programs, from camps to these programs, would work without Quinn. So I feel very lucky to get to work with her today. So for those of you all who are not familiar with Trees Atlanta, we are a 40-year-old nonprofit. We protect and improve Atlanta's urban forest, and we do this through planting trees throughout the Atlanta metro area, forest restoration projects and green spaces all over the city and beyond, and also educational programs such as today's. And I really invite and encourage all of you all to come out and have fun in the field. Where you signed up for today's educational program, you can also find amazing ways to get involved in planting trees, restoration, Kate's nursery project, and more. We want to thank the City of Atlanta for sponsoring today's program. They make all of our urban forest education programs free for all of us to be here today. But most of all, I really want to thank you all for taking time out of your day. I realize this is one of the most precious resources that we have. And the fact that you are here today and investing and learning about ways you can take care of Atlanta's urban forest and our community means so much. To make sure that today's program works the best for all, we're going to ask most of us to stay on mute. It's a smaller groups. We might be able to go on and off a little bit more today. If you do have a question, though, we encourage you to drop it into the chat, and Quinn and I will make sure that it gets to our speakers. If we run out of time for something, we will always follow up in writing, and our recording will always be made available on our YouTube channel. One thing that we do really appreciate is that after this program, you're going to get an email, and it will have a survey, and your survey responses really help us continue to make our programs better for you. So this presentation can really help prepare you to adopt a baby seedling. They are going to be free thanks to the Georgia Forestry Commission and Trees Atlanta. You can come pick them up at the treehouse this Friday between noon and 5:30, and there'll be lots of volunteers. I think Sajel's on here. She'll be there helping. We also have a really fun workshop coming, Rooted Right, Potted, Pruning, and Transplanting Young Trees. You get to be with Kate out in the nursery and learn so much. So I encourage you to sign up for that. It's going to be really fun. And we'll even be potting up maybe some of the seedlings from this week. By planting your tree in your yard, you can help get acorns. If you get 16 acorns, you can get your yard or green space City Forest certified, and then from there go on to earn badges and other things. Today's program also earns you an acorn. So we encourage you to check out our City Forest certified site. There's so many acres, thanks to people like you who are certifying their yard for our wildlife and our forest. You can find out all sorts of ways to get involved, sign up for a newsletter, follow us on social media, check out our website. But now I get to do the exciting thing, which is introduce our amazing arborists and experts today. So first, I want to just say thank you to Dave Long for being here today. He's an Atlanta native, like many of the trees we'll be learning about today. He began his career in private landscaping, really became more focused on arboriculture and natural resource management. He's been working in the area for about 5 years. He's ISA, and then is it TRAQ? TRAQ, TRAQ certifications. His bachelor's is in environmental science, and he's currently the Community Forestry Specialist at the Georgia Forestry Commission, as well as being the Vice President of our Georgia Arborist Association. So super excited about Dave being here. And then also we have Trees Atlanta's very own Kate, who's been with the organization since 2017. She used to manage Neighborhood Woods, which is our volunteer tree planting program, worked on our development team, and now is the first person to really manage our new nursery. She's ISA certified arborist as well. She also has an amazing home garden with native woody shrubs, perennials, and trees. And she delights in the endless wonder, beauty, and surprise of native ecosystems. She feels like there's so much to fall in love with. And she's never met a plant person she didn't like. So she's going to love all of you all today. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our arborist, Dave.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Elizabeth, and Quinn for putting this all together. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to be here and learn a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, trees. I'll introduce myself a little bit. My name's Dave. I work as a urban forestry specialist with the Georgia Forestry Commission. For those of y'all wondering what the heck is an urban forestry specialist, we are basically consulting arborists at large for public property in Georgia, and I cover Northwest Georgia. So most of our agency focuses on managing fire and timber in rural lands. Our urban forestry department focuses on managing urban forests for public benefit. So it involves a variety of responsibilities, but that keeps me on my toes, and I like it. And one of my favorite things to do is get to come talk about trees. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get into it. Um, If y'all have any questions throughout this presentation, please drop them in the chat. I love to hear from y'all, love to discuss, love to nerd out. I always kind of would love more of a conversation than a presentation, but here we go. Let's talk about why plant a tree and how to plant them. So who here likes trees? Show of hands, right? If you're not raising your hand, I'm kind of surprised why you're here. You must just love some rage bait, but if you love trees, you are in a great spot. Georgia has some of the highest tree biodiversity in the nation. We have a lot of forests. We rank #1 in forestry throughout the country. Take that, Alabama. I think they're #2. And that's mostly due to metrics from the forest industry. But we also have a lot of incredible urban forests too. So the reason why we're such a great tree hotspot can kind of come down to this map here. You can see we're on this heat map where the largest amount of species of trees exist. And this is because we are the southern range of a lot of northern and Appalachian species, and we are the northern range of a lot of southern or coastal plain species, all really meeting right here around Atlanta. So great place if you love trees. We have over 250 species, and that's over 20 species of oaks, 11 native pine species, 7 native magnolias. I think we got like 4 or 5 maples if you don't count the non-native ones. I'm mostly going to be talking a lot today about the importance of native trees and native forests in particular over just individual trees in general. And that's because of this buzzword that you're going to hear a lot today, ecosystem services. So ecosystem services are just anything that trees provide, not just to our lives, but to the world as a whole. The things that trees, plants, wildlife, other ecosystems give us and give the world. And I highlight this because native trees, and in particular, intact, mature native forests, provide the most of these ecosystem services. So let's break down some of what these are. We're going to get really into some of them. Some of the most obvious ones are what we call our provisioning services. So those are the products that we get out of a forest. So wood and fuel and fiber and, game and recreation opportunities and economic incentives. So those are kind of the more direct and measurable things that we can measure at those services. You also have supporting services, and this is mostly getting into the realm of ecology a bit more. So those are things like nutrient cycling, the way the forest captures carbon, as tree mass from carbon in the air, and then degrades into soil and becomes the host for fungi and starts to build this whole food chain. So creating habitat, creating soil. Those are the supporting services. We also have a lot of regulating services that forests provide. And these are the things that, a single crepe myrtle planted in a parking lot are going to provide a lot less than a whole intact, 100-acre hardwood forest, right? So these are things like the forest's ability to soak up water during a flood event, right, and regulate floods. These are things like the way they capture carbon and provide shade and lower temperatures and create climate regulation. So these are more of those big systemic services that we get from forests as a whole. You also have a lot of cultural services. I'm sure we're all here today because we feel some of these and feel that connection to trees. These are things like that aesthetic beauty that trees provide in our lives, that spiritual connection that a lot of us have to our landscape, the ability to recreate and go learn in the forest. So things that kind of benefit us culturally. Those are often some of the hardest to measure too, and more of an intrinsic value that trees provide. Um, you can also break down ecosystem services, kind of looking at them from an environmental lens or from a socioeconomic end. So some of the environmental benefits we get from trees are things like air quality. This is a huge one, especially in urban areas where we have a lot of particulate matter in our air and a lot of urban pollution. So it's said that a large tree can meet the daily oxygen requirements of 4 people. And the Forest Service estimates that that is a $3.8 billion value on the air pollution annually removed by urban trees. And that's a measure from a few years ago. So who knows how much more that is now. Um, but this is something I think we've all can feel in Atlanta, moving from areas with trees to without, there is often that noticeable difference. Biodiversity and habitat. Biodiversity meaning the amount and the richness of different forms of life in an area. So both the amount of critters in total and different types of critters is the way you can kind of look at that. And our forests are paramount to preserving that biodiversity, especially in the city. This is where, again, native trees and more importantly, native forests provide so much more benefit than non-natives. This is partially because we have a lot of what are called specialist insects in our environment. If y'all went to Doug Tallamy's presentation a few weeks ago at the headquarters, great presentation. He talked a lot about this. So like something like a native white oak can support over 500 different types of pollinators, particularly caterpillars that live on and are specialized to that specific species. So if you don't have that species of trees in the forest, you don't have the insect and you don't have the other parts of the food web that build up off of that insect. Something like a crepe myrtle tree, right? No shade against crepe myrtles, but that's only going to be pollinated and provide habitat to generalists. So things that can survive in a variety of different environments, like a honeybee or a bumblebee, right? They can kind of pollinate anything, but you're not going to get those like specialist bees, those sweat bees, those wood bees that we get if we don't have a large variety of native species that forests often help keep intact. Another example of this is kind of like can be viewed more systemically, right? So we know that trees help cool areas and provide shade, and that in turn can influence aquatic habitat and aquatic biodiversity as well. Up in North Georgia, when the mature hemlocks started dying, people were really concerned about the integrity of trout streams and all the shade and cooling that these trees provided on their streams to create that unique mountain water habitat. So again, we need forests and trees for biodiversity and for wildlife, as well as the things that benefit us, like shade. Big one I'm sure we're all familiar with in Atlanta. I grew up in a residential neighborhood in town with a lot of old water oaks in it. And walking off of Peachtree Street into the neighborhood in the summer, you could feel an almost instant 15-degree difference there. So shade is huge for our quality of life. Carbon sequestration. So trees, through photosynthesis, they capture carbon dioxide from the air and they turn that into wood. They also reduce the emissions we need for heating and cooling. So they save us those emissions to begin with by shading our house in the summer. So we need to burn less fuel for AC. There's one study they did in the city of Chicago where trees annually sequestered the equivalent amount of carbon for all forms of transportation in 1 week. So you got like a week of free cars. And that study, again, was done in 1994. So who knows where that number is at today. But it's a really huge service they provide. Water quality, too. This is a huge thing in Atlanta where sedimentation is our number one pollutant of streams and waterways from urban development, from erosion. So trees, their roots stabilize soil. They also improve that water quality by reducing sedimentation. There's one study that showed that a 21% existing tree canopy reduces stormwater runoff by 15%. Atlanta and most cities in Georgia have around a 40 to 50% canopy, which is pretty high for the nation. So y'all do the math there of how much stormwater percentage that's absorbing. Erosion reduction, same thing. Those roots they hold in soil. They help build that soil ecosystem, a super important service. Pollution, too. This is a huge one. Trees help our cities be less polluted. Research at the universities of Iowa and Washington indicate that trees can break down pesticides and carcinogenic compounds in groundwater. Things like, well, I have a whole list of chemicals they break down here. Most of them are too complicated for me to read, but I guess atrazine's at the top of the list. But they break those down into compounds that are not harmful in our waterways. That study in the city of Chicago too estimated that trees in the city annually removed 15 metric tons of carbon monoxide, 84 tons of sulfur dioxide, 89 tons of nitrogen dioxide, 191 tons of ozone, and 212 tons of small particulates. So they estimated that to be at a $1 million value for the trees in the city itself and a $9.2 million value for trees in the entire Chicago area. Again, that was in 1994, so those numbers could be even greater today. This is all to say that trees provide us a lot of incredible environmental benefits, and you can help create those by planting trees this Arbor Day. Trees also provide us a lot of measurable socioeconomic benefits. So trees have economic value. Research by the Forest Service indicates that every $1 spent on trees creates $2.70 in benefits. So I don't know about y'all, but if someone came up to me and said, I have this investment, right? You're going to have a 270% return. I think I was getting scammed, right? But this is no scam. This is truly what trees do for us. Trees act as a natural green infrastructure, much in the way that a sidewalk or a sewer is an infrastructure. They have aesthetic beauty, they make our lives a little prettier, but they are also that infrastructure that provides us valuable services and need to be treated as such. There's one study that says $12 billion, trees provide $12 billion in the US annually when you measure for just three factors, including reducing mortality and illness and lowering electricity use for air conditioning. So trees do have a lot of health and mental health benefits, especially. There's one study that found that when hospital patients had a view of trees outside of their window, they healed at a 8% faster rate than those that did not have a view of trees. Again, that was just one study, but I do genuinely believe that trees have a healthy effect on our life just by being in the presence of them in a way that's often very hard to measure. Trees also increase our property values too. Estimates give that anywhere between a 5 to 18% increase in property value just by having trees there. There are other studies that show that shoppers tend to linger a lot longer when there is shade outside of a shop than if they're kind of out there exposed to the elements. There's a lot of other correlative studies that show trees are related to fewer rates of using antidepressants in communities, lower crime rates, higher academic outcomes. Again, very hard things to measure, but I think we can all kind of agree that trees make us healthier people mentally and physically. Likewise, trees provide a lot of economic value through forestry and all the things that we extract from the forest, all those provisioning properties we talked about earlier. So forestry is a $39.1 billion industry in Georgia and our biggest agricultural product in the state. So how to help trees in your community. Honestly, Trees Atlanta can go over this probably a lot better than I can because they provide a lot of those opportunities, such as opportunities to plant or get a tree from a tree giveaway to plant yourself, and a lot of opportunities to do really great conservation work. I also recommend taking steps for trees on your own property to help preserve and elongate their life. Hiring qualified arborists to take care of them is a great step in that, at least getting them looked at pretty regularly. Likewise, advocating for trees to your local government can be a huge help. We need more squeaky wheels out there advocating for trees. So if you are in a municipality with a tree board, that's a great way to get involved, going to council meetings. Likewise, education, like what you're doing today, is a huge, great first step. But we're going to talk mostly about that planting aspect and get into it. So why do we plant trees? Well, were you listening to the rest of that PowerPoint? Because they provide all those ecosystem services to our lives. But so some of those are beautification and aesthetics. Sometimes it just feels good to plant trees. It's a great thing to do, a great way to spend your time. But more practically, we want to replace lost canopy. Georgia is losing rapid amounts of canopy right now every year to new development. So while we can't really plant our way out of that deficit, you can make a small dent in it by trying to replace some of the canopy we're losing by replanting. A lot of Atlanta's canopy right now was planted by Trees Atlanta back in the 80s and 90s and is now finally providing those ecosystem services that large trees can. So again, trying to improve runoff, sedimentation, and erosion from impervious surfaces is a huge service to your community. and all those benefits we talked about. But we always want to talk about right tree, right place, right? And making sure you get the most bang for your buck out of that tree, making sure that it survives to maturity and can provide the most amount of those services. So it's a bit of a chicken or egg thing, selecting your species and then your site, or your site then your species. Kind of depends on what your goals and constraints here are. But overall, you want to make sure those two things match, right? You don't want to plant a tree that loves, dry conditions like a shortleaf pine in a swampy area, or you wouldn't want to plant a swamp white oak in a super dry area, right? So matching tree to site and site to tree is critical. So there are a few things you want to consider. We're going to get into all of these a little bit, but always look at the hydrology of your area, where that light is going east to west, how much sun it's getting, how much space you have to plant, soil moisture, future development plans too. Don't plant a tree where they're gonna redo that sidewalk in 10 years and destroy its roots or whatever. I love this image here. Kind of shows you what size tree and how close you should be planting that to the building. With small trees, we recommend usually at least like 10 to 20 feet from any sort of sidewalk, water main, any kind of underground infrastructure or just above ground infrastructure you might have. Medium trees are getting more into anywhere from like 20 to 40 feet potentially. And then big overstory trees like white oaks, bald cypress, things that are going to develop huge root systems. We recommend giving them at least 40 feet if you can from any, foundations, sidewalks, water mains, hydrant mains, things like that could create root conflicts. As trees grow, they're going to adapt to the environment that's around them. So, there always is a chance that it'll know that, this is a foundation here. There's concrete. I'm not going to put roots out there. But if there's a crack or something in that foundation, they will find that eventually, and then you got bigger problems. So space is always super critical. If you want to get real technical with it, an overstory tree should have about 640 square foot of open soil on the surface area. So again, that can be very hard to find in the city sometimes, especially, small yards, but that's kind of our ideal that we want to go for. A mid-story tree should have about 400 square foot of surface area, and ideally an understory tree should have about 200 square foot of open surface area. So, and that depends on, your overall area, right? So even if you have to plant a tree, in a narrow strip, or say plant a tree where there's sidewalk and compacted soil to one side and open yard soil, that could still be okay. The tree's going to adapt to where that open soil is, but you need to make sure you have enough area overall. That's why we see a lot of tree failures around town, as they are planted in areas where they just do not have the volume to reach maturity. They're going to still try and reach maturity and put on that weight, but they just don't have enough area where those roots can go out and keep them stable. So I take those measurements into account. Again, that's our ideal. Often in urban areas, you're not going to get that though. And again, species selection, consider your sunlight and your shade tolerance. Contact me or contact Kate. Ask us about, what is the right tree to put in this kind of place. We would love to help you walk you through that. But yeah, sunlight and shade tolerances. Georgia has so much tree diversity. We have trees that are adapted to lots of different types of ecotones or little spots in the forest. Redbud trees are not going to do great in full sun, right? Whereas something like sweet bay magnolia is going to eat that up. So if you want a small flowering tree, consider your sun options. Drainage too. A lot of our urban soil, especially here in Georgia where it's red clay, is very compacted and does not drain well. So if you're not going to make adjustments to that soil, you might need to grow something that's tolerant of those compacted conditions. We plant a lot of what we would call like swamp trees in urban forestry. So these are trees from a little further south in Georgia that are adapted to kind of wet, swampy environments, tend to also do really well in the hot and compacted soil environments of the urban area. So you might want to consider that. If you have really poorly drained soil, consider a swamp tree. Soil fertility too. If you have time, I recommend sending off some samples to UGA Extension and getting it tested, especially if you're going to be planting like massive amounts of trees. Most native trees, again, this is a great reason to plant native, are going to be adapted to native Georgia clay soil. Some might need a little bit more carbon thrown in there, a little bit of mulch or compost, but yeah, always consider your soil and what you're getting into there. Fertilization, I just kind of recommend doing it carefully and in small intervals. Generally for a lot of trees, when they come from the nursery, have been getting fertilized all those years and might even still have residual fertilizer in their soil. So usually I recommend holding off a year before starting to fertilize your tree. But we're going to be talking about bare root seedlings, which might, I don't know, actually benefit a little bit more from that fertilization. But again, if you don't really know what's in your soil, you don't really know the exact thing to add to fertilize it correctly. So that can be kind of tricky without that knowledge. Here's another great diagram of what you need to account for. Trees in our hard clay soil, they don't often grow down with their roots, they grow out with their roots, and that can often be 1.5 times the height of the tree sometimes going out with their roots. So just consider that and consider, does this have enough rooting volume overall? You're kind of looking at where that root plate goes. You can measure the DBH of your tree, or that is the diameter at about 4.5 feet height. And then to kind of find out where your root plate is, your critical root zone that you definitely don't want to hurt, or where those actual root zones are, you can multiply it by 5, 1.25 or 1.5, convert those inches into feet, go that many feet out from the tree, and that's kind of where your roots are going to be. I know that's kind of complicated. I can explain it more later if y'all would like. But again, you definitely don't want to damage that root plate. Those are the supercritical roots of the tree, and that means you don't want any conflicts with that root plate in the future where it might grow into it. You really shouldn't damage that critical root zone. That's 1.5 times the diameter of the tree converted to feet. And then you can get away with a lot more in the actual root zone if there's a sidewalk that needs to be built there or something. Site prep too, check out your compaction levels of the soil. Again, the more compact your soil is, we recommend digging a wider hole at planting. So you kind of have more loose and fluffed up dirt in there. Trees need oxygen on their roots, but not too much oxygen. So you don't want big air pockets or holes in the soil, but you also want just kind of a loose, consistent quality, fluffy soil, really. If you really want to learn how to do this and best do this, go to a Trees Atlanta planting. They will tell you all you need to know, and you'll get lots of hands-on practice with it. You can also do the percolation test. So pour some water in that hole and see how long it takes to drain it off. And if that's taking all day for that water to drain away, maybe you might want to consider another location or do some soil amendments. Again, if you have the time to do a soil test, that's great. And if you're planting any big trees in your yard, I would recommend calling 811 and getting your lines located if you don't know where those are already, especially if you're, planting big trees where there might be underground utilities. So we're mostly going to talk about bare root seedlings today. The other types of trees we often plant are containerized trees that usually come in plastic containers, or ball and burlap, which is like a full-on sapling whose roots have been dug out of the ground and wrapped in burlap. At our giveaways, we like to give away these bare root seedlings. This is kind of the smallest stock of plant you can get, but oftentimes they have some of the healthiest root systems because they're not really cut while they're digging, or they're not circling in the pot in the nursery and constricting themselves. They're great for volunteers, but they could sometimes, because they're so young and they don't have much energy stored up, be very fragile to urban stressors. So you're going to kind of apply all the same principles you would to plant a containerized tree, which again, you want to learn how to do that, go volunteer with Trees Atlanta. They got some of the best instructors in town on that. But again, you really want to make sure your root flare, this area where the trunk starts to turn into those first roots, you want to make sure that is above the grade line, above ground. That's kind of the nose and mouth of the tree. So if that's covered with dirt, with mulch, it can't really respirate properly, and fungal infection can kind of set in really easily at that point. So we kind of say, plant them high, they won't die. Plant them low, they won't grow. Again, it's a Goldilocks situation. You definitely can plant your tree too high, but you want that root flare where it flares out, those first roots, just above the soil, not below. I'd recommend making your hole at least 2 to 3 times as wide as your root system. If it's in compact soil, you can go even wider. You want kind of sloping sides of your hole when you dig, not just like a stovepipe, because again, that'll give the roots ability to go more outward and less of an ability to start circling around when they hit the edge of that hole, which can, again, constrict that root flare area of the tree and cut off its circulation. I'd recommend removing any grass for a couple feet around your bare root seedlings, especially turf grass can often be very competitive with a young bare root. So bare roots too, you might need to give them a little bit of staking, maybe like a little bamboo pole their first year or two. It really depends on the tree and how you're seeing it grow. But definitely make sure you come back after a year or two and remove that staking. You don't want the tree to get dependent on that. And you definitely don't want to leave any ties or wires on there that could also constrict that tree's growth and then forget about it. So watering, I recommend soaking your bare root planting with about 5 gallons of water at planting. 5 gallons, or you can fill up your hole, wait for it to drain away, fill it up again. It's kind of a rough estimate. And then I'd recommend giving it about 5 gallons of water a week, pretty much throughout the summer until probably around like September, October, somewhere in there. When you start to see it going dormant and leaves going brown and whatnot, that's about when you can stop watering. If we get 4 inches of rain or more a week, you don't need to do anything to it, most likely. And again, this is very much a Goldilocks. It depends situation. If you notice the soil is saturated, you don't want your tree sitting in the water for more than like a day at most, or it can start to get root rot. So just, do this relatively, but roughly about 5 gallons a week is what you want your seedling to be getting those first couple of growing seasons. Mulching too is a great thing to do, I recommend. Again, just don't cover that root flare area with mulch. We want to leave that nice and clear so that tree can breathe. But definitely go in, at least for a bare root seedling, I'd go out at least like 2 feet of mulch if you can. Pretty much unless you're covering that root flare, it's impossible to over mulch. So as long as that root flare is above the ground, more mulch is not going to hurt your tree. If it's fresh mulch, it can sometimes deplete nitrogen out of the soil. But after that first year or two, that mulch is going to break down and provide more nitrogen and carbon and other great things for your tree. So mulch is great, helps keep down weeds that are going to compete with it, helps retain water and moisture. Again, it breaks down into carbon in the soil and improves soil porosity, especially in compact soils. So great thing to do to mulch. You can mulch with leaves, you can mulch with pine straw, you can mulch with wood chips. I recommend going against the dyed kind, but that's mostly an aesthetic choice on my part. And tree survival, take in mind, trees in the forest produce, an oak tree in the forest produces thousands or tens of thousands of acorns a year, right? It does not expect every tree to survive. So oftentimes, if you want a good rate of survival with bare root seedlings, plant a lot of them. A tree will usually need as many years of coaching as caliper inches at planting. Caliper inches at planting means 2 inches or about like 2 to 6 inches above the soil measured with a caliper. So say my tree is 1 inch diameter at about 6 inches above the ground, it's going to need at least a year or so of coaching before it makes the varsity team and is ready to begin its life on its own. Trees do require long-term care though, watering and pruning, or trees do require long-term care. You're probably going to need to continue pruning and mulching that tree every few years, I'd recommend, but definitely those first couple years, mulch it and water it at plant it, and keep watering it throughout that first growing season. Maybe give it a little bit of fertilizer if it needs it. But yeah, just keep an eye on your tree. And if you have any questions about it, please send a pic to me or Kate. We'd love to help out. And I'd recommend planting multiples if you can. Sometimes they don't always all make it. Yeah, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them. That's also my email there. As well as, so that's my email there. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I always love to talk trees and nerd out. So thank you for letting me talk here. I appreciate it. Kate's going to come up a bit and talk about some of the seedlings we have available and all their lovely qualities. But thank you for having me. I'll turn it over to y'all.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate it. A hard act to follow. Yeah, something else that Dave did not mention is he is a former coworker of mine at Trees Atlanta, and that's how we know each other. And so delighted that we still get to work together. But yeah, thanks so much. So yeah, we have our Georgia Arbor Day seedling giveaway coming up on Friday. So if you feel inspired to take some of this information and plant some trees in your yard, we have a pretty decent variety of trees that we're offering on Friday. So yeah, come by the treehouse from 12 to 5 p.m. And we'll have a variety of bare root seedlings, but then also some containerized trees to give away. So come take a look. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about each species, focusing specifically on some of the wildlife value of what we'll be offering. And we'll have more additional info about each tree at the giveaway on Friday, but just to whet your appetite. Next slide, please. Dave? Thank you. Okay, so first, the heavy hitter, the majestic white oak. This is my favorite tree personally. And there's so much to say about like the wonders of this tree. It's crucially important and maybe the most important species in our eastern forest. As Dave mentioned earlier, supports more than 500 species of caterpillar, which then, means that many more moths and butterflies and that many more birds that can feed their young, and it expands on that food web. But then also, so many different critters, squirrels and bats and reptiles and salamanders and insects and all sorts of things. White oak acorn is particularly tasty for humans and wildlife alike. Squirrels eat a much higher percentage of white oak acorns compared to red. They'll bury the red and eat the white because it's the tasty one. I've had white oak acorn flour before, and is it super tasty? No, I don't think so, but you can eat it, so great. Next slide. Sorry, thanks. And then another oak will have some northern red oak bare roots. And again, like anything in the Quercus genus, you're supporting so many different caterpillars and insects and pollinators just by planting this one thing. Just in terms of bang for your buck, an oak tree is going to be the most, one tree provides so much different service to wildlife but humans alike. All these guys are eating the acorns, and this is not an exhaustive list. But something funny too are wild turkeys, I guess, eat so many different, or so many of these acorns in one meal. Not that there are many wild turkeys around the city, but just a fun fact, and maybe they'll come. And the red oak and the white oak too, honestly, but this red oak is particularly well known for its fall color. And if you're planting in a place, if you're planting successionally in your yard, or anticipating future tree loss, and maybe you don't have the full sun that this tree will need, northern red oak is one of the oak species that can handle that kind of partial shade, especially as it's coming into being. So it can be a good choice for that. Oh yeah, you're good. Thanks. Oh, southern catalpa, beautiful, weird southern catalpa. Another bare root seedling we'll have. This tree is just so wacky in so many ways, so witchy, and so wonderful. The flowers are really, really stunning, and you can see this enormous leaf. That sometimes it's called the cigar tree because those seed pods will dry, and they're very long. They're about, almost a foot long. But also something else that's so cool. Dave was talking about specialist species. And one that is wed to the catalpa is the catalpa hornworm, which is the caterpillar for the catalpa sphinx moth. And so they're these little caterpillars that will totally defoliate a tree, but it's okay, especially for a tree that's well established. It can handle that. Catalpa, it's a smaller tree, you can get flowers, great pollinator support, but it's also a really good opportunity to witness the coolest sci-fi in the world, which is just around you, and it's right outside in your front yard. And pardon this little tangent, but it's just so cool. So paper wasps love hornworms, and what they'll do is they will lay their eggs inside these hornworms. They're called endoparasitoids. And yeah, here we go. Oh my God, it's crazy. So you see these infected worms, and the worm is not quite dead, just as the eggs are growing and growing and growing, they'll eat just enough to keep the worm alive. But then when they're ready to come out of the worm, they'll totally wipe its insides, have enough energy to go out into the world and do the same thing over again. And that to me is just the coolest. Nature is incredible. And just think you could experience this if you plant a catalpa in your yard. Anyways, all right, next slide. I'm shook. Bald cypress, so another bare root we'll have. And as Dave was mentioning, some of these bottomland species really, really perform well in our urban soils because just like an inundated soil with water, not a lot of oxygen, our compact clay soils also not a lot of oxygen. And so these trees are well adapted to that. Bald cypress, in the middle picture, you pictured in this, often in a swamp, often in colonies, but the bald cypress is super, super well adapted to drier, droughtier soils and can handle a pretty broad range. And what's nice about it too is even if you have, a yard that's not enormous, you can still get this kind of overstory shade in a narrower space because the bald cypress is not going to grow to be more than 20 feet wide or so, and so it can handle that tighter space. And something interesting, it's only one of 2 genera of deciduous conifers native to North America. So you have Taxodium, and then Larix, the larches. And so it's just kind of an unusual, really feathery, little feathery needles that fall. And then you have this really, really lovely kind of like goldeny red, kind of like furry looking bark. So year-round interest. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and so I just found out this week that I have a surprise 5th species of bare root. So black walnut, we'll have a limited number of these. Yeah, beautiful black walnut. This is a tree that you definitely need a lot of space for. But if it does reach its maturity, it's this gorgeous, gorgeous, really like wide and sweeping tree. The nuts are edible, tasty, and you can make dye from the nuts. Yeah, I mean, they're lovely. One thing to note about black walnut is there is a lot of garden plants like tomatoes, blueberries, azaleas, other things like this are susceptible to this toxin that the tree puts out around its roots for like its competition. So something to note, maybe don't plant it right next to your vegetable garden. What's kind of cool, and I didn't know this until fairly recently about a black walnut, is a young tree will start producing nuts like maybe like 8 years into its youth, which is pretty early for a larger nut tree. You're not going to get these like, big nut drops for many, many decades, but kind of interesting. So next. And so those are our 5 bare root species that we'll have available. But then I also will be giving away some containerized trees grown at our nursery across the street. And so I'll have some scarlet oak, which again is another one of those quercus that is going to provide so much habitat, so much food, shade for wildlife and for us. Scarlet oak, as you might guess, has really, really brilliant fall color. Really, really lovely. It's a little bit smaller than those other oaks, so it could be a nice choice for a medium to larger size yard. And then the tree that everyone loves, the pawpaw. So yeah, pawpaw is a native tree, makes the largest fruit native to North America, kind of like a banana and a mango, custardy. It's an interesting flavor if you've never tried one. Again, another host for a specialist, the zebra swallowtail. And coyotes really enjoy the fruit. A bunch of different animals enjoy the fruit, and that is the challenge of getting it. If you can beat the critters in September when the fruit falls, but also, even if it's not for the fruit, it is just a lovely little tree, and really, really beautiful flowers and things like this. You do need 2 of them. They're not self-pollinating, so you need to be able to cross. But we'll have a limited number of pawpaws and scarlet oaks in containers as well on Friday. But yeah, we'll have more information about all these trees, but really hope to see you on Friday to come pick up. And yeah, as Dave said, always here to answer questions or just chat trees or, whatever it is. I would love to talk more. And yeah, nice to see those of you that I know. Hi. But cool. Thank you. Turn back to Beak.
Thank you so much, Kate and Dave. That was really a wonderful presentation. I want to invite everybody, this is your chance if you're thinking about getting a seedling, and you have questions about your yard and which tree it could go best at, or just questions in general about wildlife or any of the other ecosystem services. Feel free to, it's a smaller group, so feel free to even just raise your hands and we can also call on you.
Hi, I have a question, and thanks for doing this workshop. My friend recently gave me, well, we dug it out, a 4-foot eastern red cedar. They said it's a member of the juniper family. I don't know. And it's not doing good. It took my husband 4 hours to dig out and from my neighbor's yard, and we were very careful with it and think we made the hole wide enough and deep enough. And then I used some kind of fertilizer, root fertilizer mixed in with a lot of water, and it's not doing well. It's been there about 2 months, and the outer part of it is turning brown.
Dave, you wanna? Yeah.
Yeah, this is where both me and Kate are probably going to give a lot of forester answers, which is it depends, because trees are God's creation, and there's often never one you know direct cause, direct effect, etc. But I'll give some general advice for planting this cedar or for taking care of this cedar. This could just be transplant shot because it was planted so recently. Again, I mean, imagine if you had, part of your body pulled up and transplanted to another place, right? It's very stressful for trees. So that transplant shot can manifest for at least 2 years, sometimes. So it, could just be adapting to its new environment there. So making sure, and it sounds like you're already just kind of babying it as much as you can, taking care of it. But this is where the Goldilocks effect takes in, but not loving it to death. Eastern red cedars, they're adapted. You'll notice as you drive like towards Tennessee, you start getting more and more and more and more of them as you kind of get towards Chattanooga. That's because they're very much like a limestone mountain tree. They like alkaline soil and they like pretty dry, pretty poor soil. So maybe holding back off on the water a bit and definitely holding off on the fertilizer for a bit
Okay.
might help it. Um,
How about
yeah.
sun? I heard it liked sunshine. Is it not true?
It likes sunshine. It kind of tolerates the whole light spectrum, really, in my experience.
And you know those nights recently where it was freezing a lot at
Yeah.
night? I didn't water them because I was afraid I might be freezing the roots if I did that. Was that, what do you,
Generally speaking, we advise like watering the heck out of your tree before an ice storm. When that water is in the soil, it actually kind of insulates the roots more than freezes them.
about during the ice storm?
During the ice storm, for your own comfort, I'd recommend not watering.
Hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, watering and really soaking in your new trees before a really intense like freezing event can help them a bit. But you
Not
definitely
so
can
much.
overwater a tree.
But not during it because um it was freezing for like a week solid or something like that at night, and I was worrying about it that I wasn't watering this new tree enough. So should I have been watering it during it? I now know about watering it before it.
Um, Again, based on what else you've told me, like generally speaking, yes, but because of it's a cedar in particular, I would say no, just because they range far, far north of Georgia, into Tennessee, Kentucky, probably even north of that. I feel like I've seen them up in like New England and stuff before. So they are a cold tolerant tree. The only way really that ice and frost is going to hurt them is if you get a lot accumulating on the branches and weighing them down.
Okay.
But the temperature itself should not be an issue for a red cedar.
Thank you so
But
much.
overwatering definitely could be.
I'll hold on because I've been
Yeah.
watching Brown. I'm like, oh,
Maybe.
And
Again, that's just my best guess.
thank you.
yeah, and Don, I grow Eastern red cedars for holiday trees. And when I first transplant them into even like a different pot, they do get that. You see a little bit of the shock, and then they do grow out of that. So
Okay.
give it a chance.
Thank you so much.
We had another question that said, how much afternoon sun can a pawpaw take, or how much afternoon shade can it take?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Hillary. Yeah. So a pawpaw is gonna like partial shade. I think any like really intense, like I wouldn't plant it on like the southern face of your house. It's gonna get that really, really intense hot heat in the afternoon. But that said, I also have seen, like well-established pawpaw trees that are getting more full sun. They definitely appreciate the partial shade or like shaded afternoons, and they can survive like in a deep forest. You're not going to get as great of a fruit from that if it's in the heavy shade. But yeah, or pawpaws, you'll find them all over the forest and in deep shade. So, but yeah, really just the like intense summer direct afternoon sun wouldn't bode well, but anything less than that should be fine.
And this is another question that I don't think we have. Kate, let me know what your thoughts are about this. But it says, how many trees can we get on Friday? Do we have to show restraint?
I love this question, Cynthia. I don't know. I mean, I guess I can tell you how many we'll have. So we will have, I believe, 25 catalpa, 25 northern red, 50 bald cypress, 50 white oak, 25 black walnut, 10, 10 scarlet oak, and maybe 15 pawpaw. I think the best bet is to come, or like if you have a species that you really, really want, come early, because I'm sure we'll run out of some of those by the end of the day. I am not sure what we've done in the past, but I would say like 3 or 4 each seems good to me. So you can plan your multiples.
That sounds great. And then somebody else asked a follow-up question about pawpaws. How close should your 2 pawpaws be to each other?
For like cross-pollination purposes, so long as they're on the same property, you're good. And honestly, I mean, there's so many, or I feel like once I got to know what a pawpaw looked like, all of a sudden I started noticing them everywhere, a tree that I'd never known before. And so they are all over the city. And oftentimes, like an American persimmon, you can get cross-pollination kind of accidentally because there happens to be one nearby. But to ensure it, so long as they're, on the same property. But I wouldn't plant them any closer than about 15 feet from each other, 10 to 15 feet if you want like a nice little grove.
Does anybody else have any questions? We have 2 arborists here. If you're thinking about giving a tree a new home, this is a great chance.
Is there any way of we could ever get an arborist to our house? I bought a house last year in Clarkston, and there's an ivy patch, and in the ivy patch there must be like 10 or 15 oak trees, 10 or 15 pine trees, some that I'm not sure if they're sugar maple or sweet gum, and I needed someone to guide me, like do I prune these? Do I take some out? What to do? I just don't know.
Oh, sorry, Dave, go on. Were you about to say something?
All you.
Go ahead.
Oh, generally speaking, the best way to find just a consulting arborist to go take a look at things and not someone who's trying to cut down any trees is to go to treesaregood.org. And they have a tool where you can enter in your zip code and it will give you consulting arborists in your area. You meet in Clarkston though, hi neighbor. Give me a call. I might be able to help you.
I would love
Or
to.
give me an email. I'll
I
drop my email
will.
here.
I wrote down your email really quickly before it went away, and
Can you drop it again, your email in the chat, Dave?
Yes, I just put it in the chat there.
Perfect.
I might be able to swing by after work one day.
that would be great. Let's see. I'm not sure where I wrote it. Oh, is it dlong@gfc.state.ga.u?
.us.
Oh, .us.
I know it's a long one.
Okay, great. Oh,
And
yeah,
then,
that would take
sorry.
something off my mind to know what to do here.
Thank you. Somebody else asked, what is that Japanese system where they plant a lot of trees in close proximity of each other and they flourish? And that is, I think, the Milwaukee method. We had somebody present on that, I think, last year. And I can try, if you drop in your email, I can try to send you the book or look that up. But Kate or Dave, do you have anything that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. If you have the presentation worth sharing, and then if you want to kind of see one in action, one of our Beltline Arboretum spaces called the Tiny Forest is a demonstration of that method. It's over here on the west side, off like really close to our office at 825 Warner Street Southwest, near the Candida Treehouse, just down the Beltline Trail. And it's a little bit hard to see from the trail. Once they install signage, it will be more obvious. But last year, I guess about a year and a half ago, we planted a bunch of bare root and 1 gallon trees very, very close together. And the idea is that you're pushing, or you plant these like different successional species and you push them into competition with each other to encourage that really fast growth. And what happens is in a small space with like pretty limited or like low input, because barrier trees are not expensive, especially when you're talking about, big ball and burlap, large caliber trees. You can get a bare root for cents. And so by planting a bunch of those, you can really encourage some very fast growth. And already, since we installed that tiny forest, it's like unrecognizable how fast everything grew up. So yeah, definitely worth taking a look, or stop by the office and someone can walk you down and show you too. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting, or that presentation was really interesting, especially in an urban context, and kind of reclaiming these smaller, in between spaces. So yeah.
And I believe, just to tag on to that Max Watkins, she's one of the docents. She has a great tree tour that starts on Trees Atlanta's campus and walks down to that tiny forest. So that's a great one to sign up for. She usually does it a couple of times per season.